So right off the bat, Ori and the Blind Forest and Ori and the Will of the Wisps are both great games, though a lot of people would argue that Ori and the Will of the Wisps, the sequel, is objectively better. But I want to talk about why I personally prefer Ori and the Blind Forest, the original, more than its sequel. The Ori games are both very story-focused games, so you have to take pacing into consideration. Ori and the Will of the Wisps has a much larger world than Ori and the Blind Forest, along with a lot more collectibles and secrets. This is good because it allows for more playtime, and more stuff to do in games is always great. But story-focused games like Ori, longer playtimes and more backtracking means you have to wait longer to get to the story beats. I 98%'d Ori and the Blind Forest. It took around 8 hours, and I felt like I was consistently moving along at a brisk pace. I rarely went long stretches of time without any story beats, or at least a narrator saying something. On the other hand, I 91%'d Ori and the Will of the Wisp in around 14 hours, and there were plenty of times where I was waiting for long periods of time for the next thing relevant to the story to happen. Overall, Ori and the Will of the Wisp felt way more drawn out than its predecessor, which was good for gameplay, but left me wanting with the story. The place in Ori and the Will of the Wisps, where the stretched out nature of the game is most apparent, is the major character death. I think Neru's death in the first game was done better than the death of Ku in the second game, and I feel pacing is a big factor in this. I went into both of these games knowing that Neru and Ku would die. I mean, Neru's death is literally in one of the trailers, and Ku's is heavily implied. So the developers were clearly not trying to hide the fact that they die. The place where these games differ here is that in Ori and the Blind Forest, Neru dies very quickly. This allows the developers to beat you down with things that get you emotionally attached to Neru, so quickly that you don't have time to get unattached. But with Ku's death, the game really takes its time, making you go through the entire first part of the game and beating the first dungeon before you see Ku again, which gave me a lot of time to emotionally prepare and get unattached. Like, Ku's death is still sad, but it did not have the same emotional impact as Neru's. Some other reasons why I prefer Ori and the Blind Forest over Ori and the Will of the Wisps include, I feel that the pound ability is more utilized and better in the first game than the second, and I personally feel that the island in the first game is cooler than the one in the second. It just has a more magical feel. And the fourth main reason why I prefer the first game to the second is the villain. Shriek in the second game has a more scary design, but Kuro in the first game just feels a lot more imposing and intimidating. But the main reason I like Kuro more than Shriek is her motivation. I was actually pleasantly surprised with how good of a villain Kuro was, because Kuro is an animalistic antagonist, and animalistic villains are usually not very good. They either just relentlessly hunt the protagonist, no matter how much energy they waste, or how little energy the protagonist will give them. That, or they're just evil for no reason, even though an animal that just wants to survive would have no interest in doing evil things for evil's sake. Kuro, though, is a sympathetic villain with an understandable motive, which makes sense for an animal to have. The spirit light accidentally kills her children, so she destroys the light to protect her last egg. Then, she restores the light at the end because it is the only thing that can stop the fires that she caused, which are coming close to her last egg. She's not hunting Ori because she's evil for no reason. She is hunting Ori to make sure that he does not restore the light, which could kill her last egg, which is a totally understandable motive for an animal to have. On the other hand, Shriek is just a jerk. In the end, Ori and the Will of the Wisps is most likely the better game, because it has better combat, better level design, and is longer. But I like Ori and the Blind Forest more for its quicker pacing, more interesting world, and because Kuro is a sympathetic and understandable villain, while Shriek just has crippling depression.